My past two Mario Kart videos, I focused on two track types that appear in every Mario Kart game, Rainbow Road and Mario Circuit. Due to appearing in every game in the franchise, it was very interesting to compare them to each other and see how the theme evolved over time. In both of those videos, I mentioned there's only one other track type to appear in every Mario Kart game, that being Bowser's Castle. But I don't feel like doing that, let's talk about Yoshi. While not every game in the series has a Yoshi track, many of them do. Unlike the Rainbow Roads and Mario Circuits though, the Yoshi tracks are pretty much only similar to each other through name. There are a few similarities, but a majority of elements between the tracks are quite different. Welcome to another episode of Level by Level. In today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at every track in the Mario Kart series to include Yoshi in the title. Currently, 6 of the 8 games have an original Yoshi track or a remake, giving us a total of 9 different tracks to talk about today. Definitely the shortest of this every track mini-series so far, but I think the variety in their designs will make up for that. And also I need a short video to make. We'll be analyzing each of these tracks on pretty much just how fun and creative they are, and of course we'll be throwing them into a tier list as well. Keep in mind that the tier list is relative to the other Yoshi tracks and not every track in the series. That means an S tier here won't necessarily be an S tier track with all of them considered. So with that being said, if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and let's jump right into our first track. Sadly, Super Mario Kart does not have any courses named after Yoshi. Wait, that means I don't have to play it. So the real first Yoshi course comes to us in the form of Yoshi Valley from Mario Kart 64. Now in Mario Kart, the goal is to race against other people to get the highest position possible. That makes Yoshi Valley's first gimmick kinda interesting. Yeah, this course has no clue what position you're in. That makes it kind of annoying to actually know how well you're doing. At the very least, you can still look at the map. What the hell happened? Yeah, so the reason this course doesn't show what position you got until the very end is because it's physically incapable of doing so. Yoshi Valley's actual main gimmick is the fact that there are about a billion different routes you can take. Conceptually, that is a really cool idea. Other Mario Kart tracks do sometimes provide multiple route options, but none take it to the extreme that Yoshi Valley does. That does make my job harder though, because I have to cover all of them. Why don't we just go ahead and start off the race? The track begins in a grassy segment, which gives a nice and bright start to the course. You're given a set of item boxes before you then have to turn to the left. That brings you into the valley itself, and I appreciate that it has a distinct look from the grassy start. It's significantly more brown with a lack of grass, and I just think that's a cool contrast. But once you enter into this section, it's time to choose a route. Immediately, you're given the choice to either go left or right, so let's start at the right. This path immediately gives you another set of item boxes before you are then forced to choose again to either go left or straight around the mountain. Choosing to go left here gives you yet another choice. Going left here just takes you back out to the far left path at the start, so that's a great path for anyone who loves completely wasting their time. Going right here brings you through a tunnel, which is a pretty cute set piece. After crossing a bridge, you then have to drive up an uphill turn past a bunch of these... okay, I have no clue what they are. They'll spin you out if you touch them though, so don't do that. Getting off this turn puts us at the point where the paths all recombine, so now let's take a look at the route we could take around the hill. This isn't anything too special as it just has us ride along these two mountains, but it feels pretty distinct from the rest of the track. For the most part it's fenced in, but there are a few gaps in the walls, so make sure to look out for them. That finally brings us to our last route we need to take a look at, the left path from the start, otherwise known as the best one. Yeah, so an unfortunate thing about Yoshi's Valley is that there's really no reason to take any other route than the left path because it is so much faster. While the multiple different routes are really cool in concept, they're basically entirely useless because everyone will just go left every time unless it's their first time playing the track. I really wish they gave some better reasons to take the other paths, like maybe one could have a shortcut that requires a mushroom and maybe another could have an item box that guarantees a certain item. It's definitely pretty disappointing to see all these other routes go to waste gameplay wise, but they do at least make the track more memorable. On the plus side, the left path is really fun to take. You can go right from here into a tunnel if you choose, but mainly you'll want to drive across this terrifying strip of land. It's extremely skinny, making it very easy to fall off. That's especially the case if there are other racers or items here, as it can be very difficult to get around them. After that, it's just a simple turn to the point where the paths recombine. For the rest of the track, there's just one route, and it's decent having a few turns with some even lacking guardrails. I will say it can feel a bit empty due to how long and flat it is, but when there are other racers nearby, it's not too bad. The path gradually gets skinnier as we go, making it harder and harder to stay on, all up until we reach... the egg. This thing is pure evil. It will spin around in this circular section and anyone who touches it will get flattened. Problem is, this egg is bigger than your mom, so it can very easily block off the path entirely. I've heard so many people absolutely hate this thing, and that's entirely understandable, but also I think it's really funny. Plus it is super satisfying to squeeze under it and escape the valley. Once you break out, it's just one big turn towards the end, though I appreciate this taking place on the grass section again, as it allows people to take one last big shortcut to possibly take the lead at the last second. So overall, this is a pretty solid course. Even if the track's gimmick of multiple routes wasn't executed the best, the main route is still very fun. So I think that lands the original Yoshi's Valley in a solid B tier. Oh, and as for the music, it's absolutely perfect. Fits with the valley and chaotic nature of having so many routes. Definitely one of my favorite songs in the series. Okay, that was a long one to start us off with. Why don't we take a step back with probably the most forgettable Yoshi track of the bunch, Yoshi Desert from Mario Kart Super Circuit. But how can it be forgettable? It's got the Sphinx Yoshi! Well, besides that, it is an extremely basic desert track. I mean, you drive on sand, there's a few cactuses, I really don't have too much to say on this. Since Mario Kart Super Circuit is entirely flat, that makes the tracks generally a lot less exciting. That's not helped by the fact that Yoshi Desert here really doesn't have any obstacles on the track. The cactuses can stop you, sure, but they're already in the off-road, so you're being slowed down if you're there in the first place. The bumps in the road at this part can be slightly annoying, but they don't really slow you down enough to be called obstacles. I guess I do like that there are a few oases on the track, but that's mostly just an aesthetic thing since again, it's in the off-road. Yeah, I'm really running out of things to say here. Did I mention the Yoshi Sphinx? That's pretty cool. Yeah, so I think we're gonna have to put this in F tier. Keep in mind, this is just considering the Yoshi tracks. As a track in the whole series, I don't think it'd be an F tier. But for being just a generic desert track that just slapped Yoshi's name on it, I think it deserves to place quite low. The song is also easily the worst of this Yoshi collection. But it's time to return to the good tracks with Double Dash Yoshi Circuit, and it definitely lives up to that good track status. Plenty of characters have gotten circuit tracks over the series. I mean, we just got done talking about 20 plus Mario ones. But what makes Yoshi stand out as my personal favorite is, little known fact, the track is actually in the shape of a Bowser. No, I messed it up. I had one job. Yeah, okay, the entire track is in the shape of a Yoshi, and that is a super cool idea for a track. Most of the others don't really take the track outline like this into consideration, and Yoshi Circuit excels at making this a fantastic track. Before we start the race, I also just want to say I love how bright the aesthetic is. The circuits are generally brighter tracks, but to fit with Yoshi, this feels even more so, and I love that. The Yoshi stuff placed around the track like the Yoshi Copter and this really goofy sign at the start also really help in the aesthetic department. But okay, it's time for the race to begin, where we're at the bottom of Yoshi's feet. You first have to drive around it for some item boxes, and once you reach the hand, we actually get to see this track's first shortcut. You'll notice the cutouts in this hill here, and due to how the grass is shaped, you could actually use a mushroom to jump through the tunnel and reach the other side. That entirely chops off Yoshi's hand and saves a significant amount of time. Going the normal route is still fun though, as it gives a nice long turn. Then to mix up the scenery a bit, you have to go inside a tunnel for Yoshi's schnoz. This provides for an even longer turn, and it's a pretty good inclusion to mix up the aesthetic. After exiting this tunnel, we see this absolutely hysterical poster. Yeah, graphic design is my passion too, Yoshi. Anyway, if you listen to the sign and turn left, you can actually drive around the eyes and then the scales. I really like how that makes you take several turns in quick succession, and the large flower fields are really nice to look at too. However, if you really hate flowers, there's a very well hidden alternate route available. By mushrooming on this off-road, instead of falling into the water and dying, you can actually find this hidden tunnel that goes under the track. Now, funnily enough, this isn't actually any faster than the normal route, but you get an extra item box from it, so it's still worthwhile. Not to mention it's closed off from the other racers, so it's generally more safe. After the shortcut and flower, you then have to drive underneath Yoshi's shell? Saddle? You know, I honestly never thought about it. Yoshi's a weird creature. But now it's time for the ending, which takes us around Yoshi's tail. This is also the part where you see the Yoshi Copter, and if you look out into the distance, you can even see Daisy Cruiser. After the big tail turn, you then just have to get around Yoshi's boot, and this final turn has a few piranha plants thrown in to make it a bit more dangerous. But that's the end of the track, and I think they did a fantastic job turning the outline of a Yoshi into a fun course to race on. I'm pretty comfortable throwing this up in A tier. Oh, and the song is easily my favorite original theme of the bunch. It's so cheery and perfectly fitting for this track. Time for Mario Kart DS, which is our first game to include not one, but 2 Yoshi tracks. That's because Mario Kart DS was the true introduction for retro tracks into the Mario Kart series. Super Circuit doesn't count. But before we get to that, let's look at DS's original Yoshi track being Yoshi Falls. Now when I was younger, I remember playing on this track a lot because it was one of the 8 tracks available with download play, and my little brother did not have his own copy of the game. What a loser, am I right? Well anyway, Yoshi Falls is definitely the most simple of the 3D Yoshi tracks. It takes place inside a ring of cliffs, many of which having waterfalls. I also like how the center of this course is a giant pond with a Yoshi egg in the center. So aesthetically I quite like this track, but gameplay wise, it's just okay. Starting the race, the first turn basically shows off the main gimmick of this course. Most people will take this wooden area to get some items, however this is a slightly slower route. Instead, if you want to go faster, you can actually drive on the slope part next to the bridge. This not only puts you close to the edge, but also one of the course's waterfalls. Due to the water's current, this will push you toward the edge, so you have to try and drive against it so you can stay on. I actually think that mechanic is pretty cool, or maybe that's just nostalgia talking. This entire course is pretty much just slightly different versions on that idea. The next waterfall we see is much longer than the first, making it easier to fall off on. As a kid, I genuinely thought you had to use a mushroom to get across. The next waterfall has a bunch of item boxes flowing out of it, and it's fun to try and grab them as they come down. But that's also unfortunately the last waterfall of the course. The rest of it is just a bunch of boost panels towards the ending. So yeah, this is definitely on the simpler side. I do like the gimmick, but I can't really say this track is too special when it's so short and the shape is basically a McNugget. So I'm gonna put this in C tier. Definitely far better than Yoshi Desert, but I would much rather race on Yoshi Valley. As for the song, I actually like this a good amount. Not nearly as much as Valley or Circuit's theme, but hey, it's pretty good. But like I said, we aren't done with DS just yet, as it's still got its retro course. We're actually going to go in a bit of a retro streak here, as the next 4 courses we have to talk about in this video are all retro remakes of tracks we've already talked about. So the first Yoshi themed track to get a remake was Double Dash Yoshi Circuit. Is this version able to stand up to the original? No. Yeah, so the thing about Mario Kart DS retro tracks, they mostly suck. Since the DS is less powerful than the GameCube, not only did they pick the most simple tracks to port over, but even then, they've been significantly downgraded from their original version. I mean, they even had to downgrade Baby Park. That's embarrassing. Now, luckily, the main thing I loved about Yoshi Circuit was that the layout was in the shape of a Yoshi, and that's still intact here. It's really the extra details that have gotten removed. Most of the funny signs, gone. Yoshi Copter, gone. Heck, even the piranha plants at the end of the track had their pipes taken away. Don't worry though, guys, the turn left sign is still here. On top of those changes, the layout itself is a bit different too. While the shortcut through Yoshi's hand is luckily still here, the hidden tunnel near the flower section has been completely removed, which I think is really sad. Speaking of those flowers though, they're gone too. Now the turn that had them are just walled off bits of grass, which looks far less exciting. So yeah, this is definitely a weaker version than the original. I wouldn't say it's bad just because the main things I liked are still here, but it's hard to say this deserves to be in the same tier. So I'm going to be putting this below Yoshi Valley in B tier. Still a fun course, but this is a mediocre remake. The song is still at least fantastic though. Alright, time for Mario Kart Wii, which only got one course this time. Instead of getting a brand new Yoshi course of its own, Mario Kart Wii's only course is a remake of Yoshi Falls. Of the remakes we have to look at today, this is easily the least changed from the original. In fact, the only noteworthy change I can think of is this one singular ramp that was added on the bridge going over Waterfall 3. That's it. I mean, tricking off ramps is pretty fun, so I guess this is a better version of the course. I'm just gonna put this right next to it in C tier. Song is just as good as it was in DS. Mario Kart 7 didn't have a Yoshi course. So that leaves us with Mario Kart 8, which has 2 remakes and 1 original course because Mario Kart Tour isn't a real game. Funnily enough, these are each spread across Mario Kart 8's different forms of releasing tracks. One was in the original release, one was in the DLC for the original, and the last one came in the Booster Course Pass. We'll go chronologically in order that they release, so starting off we have the remake for N64 Yoshi Valley. In contrast to Mario Kart Wii Yoshi Falls, this is by far the most different remake we'll be seeing today. Starting off, I just want to talk about how fantastic the aesthetic looks. There's so much life now with trees and Yoshis filling the grassy section, and the valley itself has so much more detail to it. I know it's no surprise that Mario Kart 8 looks great, but I still think this might be my favorite looking track of this entire video. But now let's look at the gameplay changes. First off, this track actually functions now. You can see what position you're in without having to look at the map, which is very, very helpful. But speaking of the map, how have the many routes here changed? Well, starting at the far right again, the path that goes around the mountain now has a brand new glider ramp and cannon. That's a really cool addition, and seeing the barrel as you race around the track also helps a lot with the aesthetic. It makes this route feel a bit faster too, which is nice, but spoilers, still nowhere near the speed of the far left path. Before we get to that route though, it's now time to take a look at the tunnel path, which now expands the tunnel to be much longer and replaces the weird spike enemies with swoopers. But finally, what about that route you're actually gonna take? Well, this also received a very significant change that I'm a pretty huge fan of. In the original, your only choice was to go across the very skinny strip of land over the valley, but now you're actually given options. The skinny land strip has now been replaced with an even skinnier bridge, making it scarier to cross, especially when there are other players and items on top. Luckily, if that's the case, you can take a slightly slower path around it with 2 Goombas to avoid. I think this is a great idea because it adds some legitimate risk and reward to the track design. Since the Goomba path is also not that much slower than the bridge, it's actually realistic for the player to take either path depending on the situation of the race, which partially restores Yoshi Valley's idea of taking several different paths. I still wish the other paths had more reasons to go on them, but I appreciate this change a lot. Also down this left path, there are several new ramps to trick off of, which is a good modern addition since tricking wasn't a thing back on the N64. Even once the paths recombine, there's still some pretty great changes to the track. If you remember in the original, I said this turn felt a bit plain and boring due to being long and flat, but the 8 version completely fixes this by having the turn on a sloped surface. That makes it visually more interesting and gameplay wise as well. Now the rest of the valley section remains fairly similar from this point on, though there are a few extra guardrails. Personally, I think I would have kept them off, but hey, the stupid egg already causes enough trouble. The ending of the course back on the grass though did receive some changes. It's now a bit more windy, which creates the opportunity for this off-road shortcut with a ramp. I personally prefer going through the last patch of grass, and this was made more interesting too with the addition of thick trees to avoid. So in the end, this track received a fairly big overhaul. I'm honestly a bit surprised just how much changed about this track, and I'm happy they did because I love racing on it. I think I've got to throw this at the top of A tier, not S just because they could still make the other routes better, but this is a really fun track. Oh, and the remix of the song is absolutely fantastic. I love listening to it. As for the remake to come in Mario Kart 8's DLC, we have Yoshi Circuit once again, which actually made this the first non-SNES track to receive more than one remake. Of course, many other tracks have the multiple remake honor now due to the Booster Course Pass, but Yoshi Circuit was the first. Surprisingly though, this remake is actually a bit controversial. Most people still like it, but many say the Double Dash version is better, so why don't we take a look and see what they mean. Well, first off, 8 Deluxe is easily better visually for me. That's not too surprising due to how much better 8's graphics are, but a lot of people would actually disagree with me there. It's because the turn left sign isn't here anymore, F tier. This track actually doesn't include many of the cute details from the original track like the signs in Yoshi Copter. Also, I'm choosing to headcanon that Daisy Cruiser sank, rest in peace to the crew. This track makes up for those lost details with plenty of its own though. The boot at the start has now been replaced by a small town which breathes so much life into here. The background in general just looks phenomenal across the course with so much detail. My absolute favorite new aesthetic detail though has to come with the hand shortcut, which now has you jumping through a waterfall. This just looks so much cooler than the original, and I don't see how anyone could disagree with that. Speaking of shortcuts though, this track is still sadly missing the tunnel from Double Dash. I definitely think they should have had it included here. Maybe they even could have had a glider ramp ramp leaving it. However, it's not really a huge portion of the track, so we're not missing too much. What is an important section though are the flowers, and this actually received a big update. Now instead of having piranha plants at the end, they're placed in the flower fields. That makes these turns much more dangerous, but what I really love is the fact that the flowers aren't walled off anymore. Now you can cut them with a mushroom for a mini shortcut, or you could even do what I do and hop over them without a mushroom due to the off-road being so small. This makes each run through of the track significantly more fun for me as I try to jump around the piranha plants without landing in the flowers. I honestly think having this is worth sacrificing the tunnel, because in all honesty I probably wouldn't use the tunnel much, whereas this affects each and every lap. The rest of the course is pretty much the same beside the new ramp underneath the Yoshi shell, which just adds a bit of extra speed here. So overall, while I understand some people liking the original more, I think 8's is far better. So much so that I'm putting it up in S tier. The look of this track is just phenomenal, and the gameplay changes here help it to be even more interesting. Oh, and let's not forget the song, easily my favorite of all 9 tracks in this video. But now it's time for the final Yoshi course in the series, Yoshi's Island. This is one of the booster course tracks that they tried to claim as original to 8. These vary wildly in quality as some of the series' absolute best tracks to some of the weakest. So how does Yoshi's Island stack up? Well, let's jump into it to find out. First things first, this is actually considered to be a crossover track. These are special in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe because they get so many additional aesthetic tweaks that other tracks wouldn't. One of the most prominent being the coins changing texture, now featuring a Yoshi face on them. This track is obviously meant to reference the Yoshi Island games, which we see through several of the track's unique obstacles. Since this is supposed to be a tie-in to the Yoshi's Island series, I actually think the booster course pass aesthetic works here. Obviously, it's much worse than the base Mario Kart 8 tracks, but since Yoshi's Island is meant to be bright and colorful, it actually works fairly well here. But what about the layout itself? Well, you begin the race in a sort of fall setting, which is a really lovely start to the course. There are even some exclusive enemies to avoid, like these shy guys on stilts and this big Huffin' Puffin that can walk around and get in your way. I love that they went through the effort to add exclusive obstacles just for this track, as it makes the crossover aspect much stronger. They do still have a few enemies we're used to though, like this piranha plant taking down from a tree root. If you manage to avoid its bite, you then transition into a water segment. This is visually completely different from the start of the course, but that was definitely the point. The idea here is that we're racing around the whole island, so they cram in a large variety of different locations from the game on this track, and they flow really nicely together. This water section simply has us dodge a few sidesteppers while allowing us to trick off a few water geysers as well. Exiting out of the water puts us into a mini cave section, which has a few off-road cuts we can make with a mushroom. Then we have this really cool outdoor segment where we have one big turn going up this hill. At first it starts out being very snowy, but once you reach the top it actually turns into a volcano. Despite just how different those two settings are on paper, this transition feels natural, and I think that's a testament to just how well this track manages to blend all of these settings together. At the top of the volcano we're then given a glider ramp which allows us to fly up into a cloud section. There's a nice jump here with a ramp and a big turn before you're taken off the cloud. Now you could just land straight in front of you for the track's final turn, or you could try and take what might just be my favorite shortcut in the Mario Kart series. As you're flying, you may notice this cloud with the green question mark on it. As you may suspect, this is lifted straight from the Yoshi's Island games. In that series, hitting one of them would be able to spawn in a large number of things, and they were able to perfectly translate that into Mario Kart. If you manage to touch it, a giant red bridge will spawn in over top of the off-road, allowing you to save a ton of time on the final turn. Grabbing this cloud is very difficult though, as it flies around pretty wildly, but that just makes each time you do get it feel so much better. I love shortcuts that don't require mushrooms, and this is probably the best example of that. It's a fantastic challenge and reference to the Yoshi's Island series. What more could you ask for? I also love how you jump through the ending ring from the series if you take the cut. But that brings this track to a close, and I think it's safe to say it's phenomenal. Not only does it do a great job tying into the source material, but the large variety of locations keep this track engaging every time you play. They're all the perfect length to be memorable but not get stale. So for that, I think this easily deserves to be crowned as the best Yoshi course in the Mario Kart franchise. The song here is also a great rendition of the Yoshi's Island theme, though I do still think I like Yoshi Circuit and Yoshi Valley's themes a little bit more. Still, this is an absolutely great way to end off Yoshi's legacy in Mario Kart. They should kill him with hammers to make sure he doesn't make another track. But anyways, that's it for this video. Do you love Yoshi's trick animations in Wii and hate me for thinking Yoshi Falls Wii isn't peak? Let me know in the comments. I know this is definitely not a Mario Kart video you all were expecting, but I actually had a lot of fun with it. I've been really enjoying this every blank track mini-series, so I definitely plan to do more. Of course, we have the Bowser Castle still, but I think every Ghost House track video could be cool too. But anyways, dry bones for Smash, and I'll see you guys next time.